Okay, we'll say the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Make a motion to approve the minutes and agenda.
I'll second that.
Got a motion from Jens Holden, a second from Smith to approve the minutes and agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carries. Discussion with possible action regarding COVID-19 policies. Julie, are you on? She is not. Well, Julie, is that you?
It is me. How are you guys this morning?
Good morning, Julie. Good.
You got anything for us on COVID policies?
No, just in the last 7 days, we're still sitting at 11%, and there were 56 positive cases. Total vaccinated for our county, is 46.6%. And, still COVID clinics on Thursday afternoons from 1 to 4, if people want to get a shot. And then we are starting flu shots, next Monday by appointment only. So if you want to call, you can call in and we'll take all your information and you can come and get your flu shot. And that includes staff too at Winnebago County if they want one. So just have to bring your insurance cards.
Julie, is that 46.6% vaccinated? That's fully vaccinated then? That's both?
Yes. Yep.
And anything on the boosters? You have them for people, right?
Yes. Yep. For their second shot, or are you talking the third?
Third.
Yes, I do have those shots. They still have to fall under the criteria of immune compromised, cancer, transplant. I believe there's a list on our webpage.
Does it include first responders and teachers?
Not yet, no.
So
Only if they fall under those categories.
So there's a little bit of difference of opinion then? Because that Raquel.
Well, when someone comes in and says, I'm taking a cancer drug, or I have cancer, I have had cancer, I mean, we have to take them at their word. Or, are they immunosuppressant? So, but that's who they're telling us have to get, are in that category for the third dose.
So your information comes from what department?
IDPH.
Okay. And they sort it all out who's eligible.
Right, yep, that's not us, it's them. We get it from the state. And they get it from the CDC.
Well, I was under the impression that that head of the CDC is the one that said that first responders and teachers and those were eligible.
I have not gotten that information yet.
All right. Anything else on that? You guys have anything?
I don't.
No. All right. Well, thanks, Julie.
You bet, have a good day.
All right.
Thank you.
Winnebago County Workmen's Association to discuss current contract with possible action.
Yeah, good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Thanks for letting me get in front of you. I'm just looking to make an addition, an amendment, and then just looking for some clarity on one item. And I guess maybe I'll just start with that. So under our current contract, the probationary period of 2 years, currently we're supposed to be following an 80, 85, 90, 95, 100% ladder in compensation for new hire employees. And it's currently not reflected in our contract, and we're just hoping to get that on our current contract. And then second, we're looking to amend the vacation. So currently in our handbook, we don't have day one reflecting 5 days immediately for vacation. And then years 1 through 2, that actually increased from 5 days to 7 days. And then years 3 through 4, it increased from 10 days to 12 days. So we're just looking to amend that. And then finally, we're just looking to add Martin Luther King Day as a holiday to the schedule. That was it.
When does this contract end?
June 30th of 2022. I'm not real familiar with the probation period, the wage increases. I was under the impression that that was wording that was possibly meant to be in the contract, but I don't know if it just never found its way there or not. So I don't know if that's reflected in past minutes or not.
I think they chose to leave that out of the contract because they were gonna leave that up to the engineer. But if there's something set, I don't see the problem in adding it. However, when I talked to Mike Galloway on the phone regarding the contract changing now, he said, why are you opening your contract if you're just gonna negotiate in probably a couple months anyway?
Is there a reason you want the changes now rather than waiting for negotiations?
You know, being the contract is up June 30th, we just kind of felt it was important to see it reflected in the current contract. There's always a possibility of new employees coming on between now and then. And then with Martin Luther King, I mean, we just wanted to see that in the contract because if we wait until contract negotiations, technically it wouldn't be in the contract.
Can we deal with those on an individual basis that if they come up then? Or
What Mike said was when we deal with negotiations, make those immediately. And then,
What do you say immediately? You mean,
make the Martin Luther King Day and the vacation amendments immediately active. And then when we do contract negotiations, and then make the rest of the contract start June or July 1st,
I see.
2022.
Yeah, I guess I'd rather just open it up once and do it part of the next negotiation, rather than towards the end of this contract. I agree, we could probably make some of that effective when we start negotiating. But
Does the rest of the county get Martin Luther King Day now?
When we did the new contract, we did that, so yes,
when is Martin Luther King?
January.
As I say, it's January, February.
So we'll do the contract negotiations before Martin Luther King Day.
Yeah.
So then the only other possible consideration would be that if there was new employees and hired between now and then, you want them to be able to, have the vacation
Correct, and
right at the
then
beginning.
the probation period with the step ladder wage increase. That's actually something that, when I was hired in June of 2019, was something that I was following. So it's been there, it's been implemented, it's just the wording's not there, is all.
That's what I say, I remember upping this step as far as the step ladder thing goes. It seemed like to me anyway, I had a really good memory, it just doesn't always last very long. So. It seemed like we'd already done that.
Yeah, and I was curious to know if the wording was there, it just never reached a contract or not, so.
Well, we changed it after this contract.
Right.
Because it wasn't that long ago that we changed it.
It was in the last year, wasn't it?
What's that?
So it might even be beginning of this year. When we changed the step ladder on their pay.
I don't remember that conversation though since January, so.
I thought that was something that we just left up to Scott.
We have a memo approved by the board with that language in it. I can find it.
Okay.
So I don't know how that conflicts with the contract then.
It's probably something that should have been waited till a contract was opened also.
Is it enforceable by the bargaining group then? Do they get that benefit now? It's just because, are they utilizing that part of it now without it being in the word?
I would assume so.
Yeah,
Okay,
we are. It's really not a benefit. It's more of a, it's probationary wage, so it's, if anything, it's kind of.
It was a benefit because we went in your favor instead of against you with the step, if I remember right. Because it stepped up faster or something, if I remember right.
It steps up faster than it used to.
Yes. And if we have a memo that says it should be, that should be taken care of then as far as that goes until we have it officially in the contract. It's unofficially in a memo. Is that how we
It's been approved by the board, so.
Yeah.
it's
I can't see
official.
any problem with that, so.
I think it's something we could probably address when we open up the contract and negotiate then. And
We have to change that.
That seems like the best way to go. And those negotiations started,
at budget time.
The union will be voting on whether or not they're gonna keep their union October 12th to,
Are we
what is it,
Are we talking about
October,
The 26th.
you talking about the union or bargaining?
the bargaining unit are gonna be voting here soon. So after they're done with their voting time, then they can start to negotiate any time after that, so.
Okay. Well. That's where we stand on it, I guess, right now.
So you prefer to wait until negotiations to
Yeah.
make the amendments or additions?
I don't think there's gonna be a lot of difference between now and then, I mean, but we'd rather do it then. All right, well, thank you for bringing this up.
Yep.
At least we know what we have to look forward to.
Is there any anticipation that there's gonna be a new employee coming on between now and then? There's nobody that's talking about, not that you know of anyway.
Not that I know of, no.
No, so the risk is relatively low.
Okay,
All right,
thanks,
But,
guys.
but the probationary thing does cover some that are new, right? There's some new employees that it still covers.
Every employee since Ross was hired has been subject to those.
Yeah. but their wage categories. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Scott?
Hey, guys.
Yeah,
Can I jump back to number 2 for a second?
I suppose.
I see where you, Terry, when you asked about the third dose, we just received a demographic doing the difference between the third dose and the booster. And the booster is for Pfizer only. And that's anybody who has received the full series, the other 2. And I'll get this demographic out and on our webpage. And then the booster still is the Moderna, which we have is for the organ transplant, immune suppressant therapy, and after treatment for a solid tumor and things like that. Does that help you out a little bit?
Sure.
Okay, thanks.
He's back. We're up to you.
All right.
Welcome back.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I was at a engineers meeting on Thursday, and then I worked a part day Friday, and this is my first full week back since baby born, so all good to report on that end.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
So you got it down to a science now then, so like when you're done changing a diaper, you're just like when they're roping steers, you got your hand up in the air to see the time?
No, not at all. I was telling Eric I made it to work on time today, but only because my wife woke me up out of the chair at 7:20 and trying to keep the baby quiet long enough to give my wife some rest. And so we're still working on getting schedules, down. Can't just demand the schedule out of a newborn, so
No, they're the boss.
yeah, we're working on it.
I hate to tell you, but you'll be saying these are the good old days.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's many chapters.
For sure.
We're doing our best to enjoy it.
And everybody's healthy, that's all that matters.
Yep, all good that way.
Good.
So as far as the maintenance goes, I think they're starting to do fall mowing on gravels here, and so maybe 4 to 6 weeks on that, and we'll get snow traps mowed, and I guess probably be out there kind of doing that until we get snow. Usually that's how it goes. And then on blacktops, we're kind of waiting to do the last round until it looks like it's gonna, cool off. So they're kind of on hold with that until forecast looks like more like winter. The bridge replacement project west of Leland there, they got the box in last week, and I think they got the creek even opened up a little bit on Thursday, and they've been backfilling this week. I haven't been out there, but I expect they'll have it open by the end of the week.
By the end of this week.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
So that looks pretty nice. They got the creek relocated kind of further away from the road, so we got a safer path for the drivers there, and if they happen to fall off the road, they should be able to recover, and it looks nice. And
There's a lot of traffic on that road too.
sure, yeah, with the hog confinement and the hoop building back there, and so that one will be good to get wrapped up. So I think by the end of the week, and maybe a little bit next week if needed to do some touch-ups, but get it seeded here before winter and another project done. So that'd be the last, most likely the last of the bridge replacement projects. And then our guys will work on work order stuff and hopefully tap into our other employees to kind of keep more people on work order stuff, do some ditch cleaning and other repairs like that, and hopefully knock out a bunch of that here this fall.
Ethan was saying you had, how many did he say? 24 or 20 something? Who knows?
Sounds right. I think his list of work orders is around 50, and I think about half of them are ditch cleaning, and quite a few of those have been there a little bit too long for my preference. So
I agree.
the other thing, we got, our new plow truck is in. It's, of course, just a chassis at this point. It's up here to get all of the reused snowplow equipment off of one of the cat trucks that we traded in. And so the guys will get that all fabricated and outfit on the truck and then send it back down to the dealer to get the box on. And then it'll come back up to us to kind of get final touches. So it's got a long way to go still, and not sure if it'll even plow any snow this winter, but we have it in the shop right now.
Is your equipment auction over?
Yes. We had the 2 dozers and the 3 scrapers on auction, and I should have brought that up here. I didn't, but the 62 dozer went for about $15,200, something like that. That was a really good number. 51 dozer went for about $2,500, and then one of the scrapers went for $1,000, and 2 went for $5, so $500. So scraper's not worth too much. I think they went to some scrappers, at least 2 of them, 2 of the 3. But overall, about 18,000 come that auction, so pretty happy with the way that went. Trying out a new service for just a few items. So I was happy with that.
The one dozer didn't hardly make scrap price.
And it ran?
They got it running. Yeah, I mean, there's probably quite a bit of service work that would need to be done to it to get it reliable, but it was running.
Was that all at the Thompson location? Or where?
Yeah, so the auction was online. All the
Right.
items were parked at Thompson, yep, and they still are. Hopefully stuff's getting picked up today and through the week. Hopefully have everything out of here by the end of next week.
Well, between the various auctions, we should have more room now.
Definitely. Yard's looking good, and a couple of the dozers are both inside, so that's a little bit more space in cold storage that we need.
Anything else?
I guess that's all I have.
Do you have any questions?
No.
Bill? No. All right, thanks. Let's see. We'll probably wait on the drainage matters until closer to 10. You got any open forum?
Let's see.
How's the software training going?
Right now it's just doing balancing, making sure that both systems match.
Chris gonna come in for her quarterly?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have my quarterly report and the
Okay.
transfers, if you wanna see those.
Morning, Chris.
Hello.
Susan, did you stamp that approved?
Oh, no, I did not. Going on the front page or the back page?
The second page, please.
Second page.
I'll make a motion to approve the auditor's quarterly report.
I'll second that.
On a motion from Derby and a second from Smith to approve the auditor's quarterly report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion carries. Recorder's quarterly report.
We're kind of down in our passport fees, but I'm sure that's because COVID ramping up a little bit. It was way up in July,
Yeah.
and then now this last month it was down, but we're getting more calls.
You got it.
Oh, that's right, it's gonna go that way.
Yeah, stamp it too.
We're rolling into ORV and snowmobile season.
See, you were even saving a stamp. That's good. Oh, mine was in my box.
I saw the statewide ORV ATV numbers, and they're up pretty good.
Seems like there's more ORVs than snowmobiles.
Yeah,
10 years ago that was switched.
I'm sure.
Statewide.
Yeah, so,
statewide probably 10 years ago, it was like 25,000 snowmobiles and 35,000 ATVs or ORVs.
Was there?
Now it's probably double that.
Yeah.
The snowmobiles are down a little.
I'll make a motion to approve the recorder's quarterly report.
I'll second.
Got a motion from Jensvold and a second from Smith to approve the recorder's quarterly report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion carries.
I'll make a motion to approve the auditor's transfers.
I'll second. Thank you.
Thanks. Got a motion from Jensvold and a second from Smith to approve the auditor's transfers. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carries. And it is 9:30. Discussion regarding how Worth County addresses the zoning on new wind turbines proposed for a project that involves both Winnebago and Worth County zoning.
Welcome.
Morning. Thank you.
I haven't met you yet. What?
Yeah, I'm Jeff Gorbel. I'm the chair of the zoning commission at Worth County.
Okay.
Susan asked me to come by for the discussion, so.
Thank you.
We were hoping to give you a half an hour or so here so that you can enlighten us in any way that you can.
Sure.
on What's going on.
Okay. Well, I'm sure you know Matt is double-hatted as zoning administrator for Worth County, so he's well up on all of these matters as well. So just a little bit of, I'll start with a little bit of background and fast forward to actually yesterday. It's as a result of a wind farm that went in the northeast part of Worth County, in the Deer Creek area, that is unzoned. And I think that's a key difference to keep in mind with Worth County versus Winnebago County. Worth County zoning today only encompasses the 3 townships that straddle the interstate. The rest of the county is unzoned. And so when the wind turbine farm, when the wind turbine project got essentially kicked out of Freeborn County, it jumped across the border into Worth County, into that northeast part of the county that is unzoned. Contrary to verbal guidance that Invenergy had provided at the time with regard to what was going to happen, wind turbines were placed extraordinarily close to homes, as close as 800 feet in some cases. Turbines that were larger than originally stated were put into place. Turbine locations were moved than what was originally stated, and more turbines went in than what were originally stated. So you can imagine it created quite a lot of disfavor, if you will, to unfettered wind energy projects in the county. As a result, the supervisors passed a resolution for a moratorium on any further commercial wind development in the county until such time as they could research and review what kind of updates would be necessary from an ordinance perspective to govern commercial wind in the county. And then they put essentially a time horizon on that resolution of June 2022 in the event that they didn't take any action at all. As a result of the moratorium, the purpose of the moratorium, the zoning commission responsible for land use recommendations to the supervisors took that action up. We conducted a lot of research. We focused our research on county ordinances that were in place across all regions of Iowa. We actually leveraged guidance from 34 specific county ordinances that we had researched, along with looking at peer-reviewed scientific journals. We tried to stay away from just general opinion websites and things of that nature. We stuck to peer-reviewed scientific journals on the information, and accredited organizations, agencies, Farm Bureau, and things of that nature, to develop our initial set of guidelines, if you will. From that, we put together a draft ordinance that was focused entirely on just commercial wind development. There was a discussion during the zoning commission, should we add more detailed language in the current zoning ordinance at Worth County? The current ordinance in Worth County, again, only applying to 3 of the 12 townships, simply said it's a conditional use permit. So it's just Board of Adjustment, whatever they feel appropriate, which, as I understand, is pretty much what Winnebago County has right now with the special use permit. The zoning commission in Worth County decided that for 2 reasons, it was best to pursue an ordinance specific to commercial wind. One, just because of the sheer volume of issues that we believe needed to be captured in an ordinance. The draft ordinance is 40 some odd pages long. And so we didn't feel it appropriate to add that kind of detail into the zoning ordinance. Plus, the zoning ordinance, in order to achieve the necessary guidelines countywide, which was the direction of the supervisors, the zoning ordinance would have to be extended countywide. And we polled the supervisors, Farm Bureau, the public, et cetera, as to what their thoughts were. Should we try to expand zoning across the county and add this detail to zoning, or should we have a wind specific? And the decision by the commission was it was best to pursue just a wind specific ordinance. So that's what we had developed. We provided that online and via paper form at the auditor's office for public input. I believe we gave, I think it was something on order of nearly 3 weeks that people had available to get a copy of that ordinance, the draft ordinance, look through it in detail. And we solicited feedback, written feedback directly, either mailed to the zoning commission or via email. And then we also had a public hearing where we used a community center. There were, how many people, do you recall how many people were there, Matt? I want to say it was a couple hundred people.
Yeah.
Something in that order. Interestingly, the overwhelming majority of people that spoke at that public hearing were supportive of the wind ordinance. The vast majority of comments that we got were either we like what the ordinance says, or we want you to make these areas stronger. We did get some feedback contrary to the ordinance in writing, and again, overwhelmingly the in writing was in support, overwhelmingly the public meeting was in support. Some of the counter feedback that we got, we got feedback from people that just simply said, we don't need an ordinance in Worth County that's gonna, it'll preclude any wind development in the county, and we need wind development for county budget purposes. And the county shouldn't have any business in restricting landowners from being able to have a wind turbine. That was some of the general opposition comments that we got. We did get some comments that was focused on definitions of some of the things that we had in the ordinance. And we had a comment about and I'm just going off of memory here, we had comment about, well, what happens with the wind turbines that already exist and the upgrading of those turbines. So in short, we took all of that feedback that we got, made changes to the draft, and then presented that to the Board of Supervisors in June. One interesting point that I've made in public comment to our supervisors during supervisors meetings in Worth County. Early on in the process, the zoning commission had identified specific people that we wanted to make certain that we heard from. And so we invited speakers to our zoning commission meetings to speak directly to commercial wind development issues. Invenergy was our first invited speaker. We had the County Farm Bureau as speaker. We invited our county engineer, county health folks, county conservation. So we tried to hit all of the main agencies' representatives to come speak to us, to give us their perspectives as we were doing our research. We also made certain that those folks were provided a copy of the draft during that public comment period, and we received comment from most of them. We also had invited Kossuth County engineer to give us some feedback on what they had gone through. But during that review period of the draft, we had provided a copy to Invenergy. They had originally said that they would review the draft and provide us comments. As it turns out, they decided somewhere up the food chain above the project manager that no, Invenergy is not going to provide feedback to the ordinance. They were and have continued to say that they believe they have vested rights, which is a legal doctrine in Iowa. They believe that they have vested rights in the project, and so the ordinance wouldn't apply to them for this particular project. but even for future projects, they didn't provide any feedback, which was disappointing because there were some specific things in there that, and I had voiced this to their project manager, that I thought we could really benefit from their review of the details and feedback. So we provided that recommended ordinance to the supervisors. We also recommended at the same time that if the supervisors went forward with the ordinance, that we recommended that they look at budgeting for quality sound measuring devices that could be used by the county, some designated official of the county, just as an initial first step in the event that people had a noise complaint, because the ordinance specified noise limits and it specifies a complaint process. And the thoughts of the zoning commission was, well, if the county has a sound measuring device and somebody believes they have a sound complaint, this can serve as just a first check that no, the sound isn't as bad as what you measured. It's not as bad as the limit. So you probably don't want to submit your complaint. You certainly can, but you probably are going to fail. So that was another recommendation. During all of that period from June until present, and we've come to find out even probably before June, Invenergy has had ongoing discussions with the supervisors individually and then later as a group to sign off on a separate agreement. So they decided that they would take the required road and drainage agreement and add in a section regarding development terms, and they specified in there certain things, certain criteria with regard to setback distance, sound, and shadow flicker. In short, Invenergy's their recommended levels for those was 30 hours of shadow flicker is acceptable per year. 50 decibels of sound is acceptable, though it doesn't talk about how sound is, how that sound is to be measured. One of the things that we found in our research is just saying N number of decibels is not a legally defensible or legally sound, rather, way to describe sound limits, because there's so many different variables if you don't qualify how that sound is to be measured. And then the other one was 1,500-foot setback. During the months of negotiation on that agreement between the supervisors and Invenergy, Invenergy has not budged on those numbers. Their position is that those are representative of some of the strongest ordinances in place in the state of Iowa today, and that those things are appropriate to carry forward. The commission's point of view is that the ordinances that we were researching, the vast majority of the ordinances that are out there, whether they're language inside a zoning ordinance or they're a wind-specific ordinance, are ordinances that are 8 years and older. There's only a few that are relatively new, and even the new ones are a few years old, and the language in those ordinances were based on the wind farms that were going in place the year 2 or 3 before that ordinance. So if you have an ordinance from 2018, it's based on what had been happening in 2015 and 2016. If you look at the turbines that were being put in place at that time versus the turbines that are anticipated, saying that the limits that may be appropriate for turbines of the technology and size from 2016, as an example, clearly different than the turbines that are going in place in the future, and some of the standards for those turbines need to change. The zoning commission in Worth County decided that when we reviewed the the ordinances that had been in place in Iowa, most of them relied just solely on setback. And we determined that historically, that seemed to be the manner that counties tried to manage the negative impacts of sound. Or, I'm sorry, the negative impacts of wind turbines. And when you think about it, and you talk to residents and citizens about what their concerns are with regard to wind turbines, the things that come up straight away, almost in priority, are the sound, the shadow flicker, and I don't know if you've seen the shadow flicker in somebody's home, but it's absolutely horrid. And you can't get away from it by closing the blinds or curtains. The shadow just bleeds right through. But sound is a major complaint. Shadow flicker is a major complaint. And so as the zoning commission in Worth County looked at it, we decided, well, historically setback has been the tool to try to manage those effects, but the reality is you can manage the effects of sound specific to sound. You can establish sound limits. We had decided in Worth County that we would have a daytime maximum limit, so not an average sound level, but a maximum sound level. And we described how that would be measured. But we described a maximum sound level for the daytime and a maximum sound level for the nighttime. Winnebago County is a generally rural county, as Worth County, and when you're out and about the county, there's a clear difference between the ambient noise daytime and nighttime. So we thought having two different levels would be appropriate, because sound at nighttime, people waking people up and things of that nature, or not being able to sleep, was a primary complaint. Next was shadow. We believe that technology is certainly there. We know ahead of time exactly every day where the sun is going to come up, what time it's going to come up. We know the geographic locations of the turbines and their height, so it can mathematically be determined at what point this particular house is going to be subjected to shadow. And so we decided that, well, shadow can be separately limited and there should be no shadow. And so if we have addressed sound adequately and we've addressed shadow adequately, then setbacks are really there for safety purposes. And so we did some research and we found some literature from wind turbine manufacturers that describe for a particular turbine of a specific size and so on. They had recommended 1,600 feet as a safety zone in the event of fire. We've had at least 3 turbine fires in Worth County, so we felt that, well, that's a legitimate safety concern, and if this turbine manufacturer says for this specific turbine, 1,600 feet is an appropriate zone, let's adopt 1,600 feet, but that's for that particular size turbine. Recognizing that as turbines grow, that safety zone needs to enlarge, so we did the math and came up with a multiplier. Our multiplier happens to be 3.75 times the total height. Then the zoning commission looked at, well, actually in advance we looked at, do we apply these limits to residents or do we apply these limits to properties? Certainly the adage that one's property rights begin at the property line is unequivocal. That's true. My property rights don't start at the exterior of my house, they start at my property lines. And if the limits that are established for sound and shadow and safety are appropriate to me and my property rights, then that should be at my property line and not my home. And some of the arguments behind that were, if I've got 60 acres of land and my home is in the extreme corner of that parcel, there's nothing that would prevent me from parceling off a chunk in the extreme opposite parcel for one of my children to build a home 5 years from now. If the setbacks were to my home, that could place a turbine in very close proximity that would exceed the limits stated that we had determined were appropriate limits, in that spot in the opposite corner of my property. So we determined that the limit should be placed at the property lines. There's a variety of other things, as you can well imagine, in 40-some pages of our ordinance that is discussed, but those are the hot button issues, if you would. Fast forward to yesterday, as the supervisors have been discussing the proposed agreement from Invenergy. Invenergy has not moved on their original 1,500 feet, 30 hours of shadow, and 50 decibels of noise. And so the supervisors, there was a motion yesterday to approve the agreement, and that motion failed for lack of a second. And again, that agreement was the road and drainage agreement with the development terms added in. And the supervisors are finally now looking in detail at the ordinance that was presented to them by the zoning commission in June. And they're supposed to, over the course of this week, look at that and decide what kind of changes they want to make to that draft. And then they'll provide that back to the zoning commission for us to make changes. And then the intent would be we would make the changes that each of the supervisors have asked for, but then isolate each of those changes along with what the zoning commission feedback on that change is, and then present that back to the supervisors so that they can then discuss each of the changes that each of them have asked for, and then they can vote on those changes individually, then to come up with an updated ordinance that they would then vote on. So that's where we're at Worth County right now.
So we have just a few minutes.
Yes.
Do you have something you'd like to add, Matt, to this?
You know, I kind of keep going back to, we discussed this 3 or 4 years ago before you were on, but we've had a couple wind projects in Winnebago County, and what I'd always kind of thought was a good idea, the board brought to me when I first began about 5 years ago, is Cassup County was going through a wind ordinance change. And is that something that we should do as well? And I brought to the board that my opinion is to keep a special exception permit to allow such zoning issues. And what that allows us to do is look at the project individually and to be able to assign whatever we want to the commission, along with you guys' approval, line item that permit. And what that allows, and what it has allowed, is to start the conversations early. To discuss the development, what's happening, get public input, do research. I mean, that's my job and my commission's job. You know, what I had mentioned before, and it's kind of like a simple building permit. If it meets this criteria, I sign off and it gets approved. No public input. They meet that criteria and it goes on. That's what my concern is if we move into a zoning ordinance like Worth County's proposing. If Invenergy comes in, a developer comes in and says, hey, I want to put, you know, some turbines in Winnebago County. I'm familiar with the ordinance, which they all usually are, and if they check all those boxes, I've got to approve that permit. I think it's imperative for especially something with wind to have several public hearings and, you know, just get ideas. But with a couple of the projects that have gone on, it was nice because the conversations had started early. You know, phone calls to me. What have you guys done in the past? You know, so that's just my opinion. So Worth County has the same type of thing right now. They've got a conditional use permit in the zone areas that's kind of spelled out just like our special exception permit. You know, they have to submit an application. It goes through public hearings and ultimately approval by the commission, and then it gets handed off to the supervisors as well, which I like. I think that gives everybody that's got any kind of vested interest in the county to have a say. So
It doesn't sound like there's a lot of difference in really. They have a flexible ordinance and we have a flexible special use permit.
Correct. But the big issue is right now is Winnebago County is 100% zoned and Worth County is only zoned in 3 townships. So like I say, it's the wild, wild west. If I get a phone call from somebody not in those townships and they want to put up a skyscraper, I say, you can do whatever you want. And that's the issue right now is wind developer understood that and they started building wind turbines out there. That's just my opinion that Worth County is a very interesting situation when it comes to zoning. I think they're one, and I don't know if there's any other county in the state of Iowa that has just certain areas zoned.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that either. And I've had one attorney just question whether that's even legal under state statute, that they carve out a part of the county to have to live under certain rules and the rest not. That's a separate issue. The point that Matt brings up with regard to the special use permit process that Winnebago has and the conditional use process that would apply to the Worth County zoned townships, to have flexibility to set unique conditions for each turbine location, is as opposed to saying, here are the conditions that you have to meet. That aspect of flexibility is absolutely valid. I think what we weighed in Worth County is, one, we thought that it was a harder hill to overcome to extend zoning than it was to focus on a wind-specific ordinance, number one. Number two, with the flexibility comes you have to recognize that flexibility happens on both sides, and that flexibility varies dependent on who are the members of the board that's providing the permitting process. And so there's a level of risk associated there. And one of the things that we wanted to do, and Mark Crowell even commented to us that he's the project manager for Worthwhile Wind. He commented to us that he's done wind turbine projects in Wisconsin with extraordinarily challenging permitting process. He said, but it is clearly laid out. They know what they have to do. They know what the criteria is. And we felt that providing that clarity to developers and the citizens and saying, here are the rules.
Exit conference, but leave it running. Press 1 to confirm or star to cancel.
So adding that clarity and saying, these are the rules that these things have to live by, and institutionalize those rules, so it's not just a whim decision based on the members, we felt was important for Worth County.
I guess I've got a question for Matt. Where are we at in our zoning process with the project?
Conversations I've had with Mark, maybe half a dozen of them over the last 18 months, and basically it's just kind of checking in, are you going to submit, what's your plans, and let's discuss, do you have locations?
Yeah, has he provided geolocations at all?
Right now, as of probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I visited with him and he said that they weren't planning on any wind turbines in Winnebago County right now. They were focusing on Worth County.
So in their development agreement that they provided, that they finally made public last Tuesday, the appendix to that agreement lists the geographic coordinates that they're targeting. And I believe it shows a half a dozen or so in Winnebago County.
5, I think.
5, okay. The vast majority are in Worth County. They've got 50 locations identified there. Interestingly, as recent as yesterday, they said they have still not selected their turbine technology, that their project is targeting 39 turbine locations that they believe would give them the necessary capacity, output capacity that they want for the project. And so he stated, of the 50 locations that they've identified, he said, we're not gonna use all of those, which is good because some of those locations are plotted on land that don't have signed easements today. But it's just interesting that they were driving for an agreement to lock the county into things before they've determined their turbine technology and where they're actually gonna put them. My guess is they're not really anxious to submit permits to Matt yet, or to Winnebago County yet, because since the bulk of their project is in Worth County and they need 39 turbines to be viable, there's no sense in doing anything with Winnebago until they've locked in the project at Worth County.
So that's probably why he hasn't responded. I've sent him emails and texts about if we could have the geolocations, but maybe, and he hasn't responded since then, so.
That's, they communicate when it's to their benefit.
And that's what I go back to with our special exception permit. It just starts the conversations right now. I mean, as our ordinance states, it's not gonna push away wind development. It's allowed in Winnebago County under a special exception permit. Start the conversations. I mean, that's what EDF did, and a couple other ones.
I think in the past, we used a setback number.
Yep.
And I'm thinking that the multiplier is probably a better way to go. That way, if they change their equipment.
We can always do that as well, but like Jeff said, the ordinance written today is stuff that we knew about a couple years ago. Technology changes every single day.
Yeah.
Let's look at what they're proposing, have some public meetings, let me do my job and understand, where the locations are, get in touch with the landowners adjacent and let's talk about it. In the past, we've had, one of the special exception permits allowed a couple turbines, closer than what we had talked about for setback wise, is because those adjacent landowners, signed off. They were okay with it. And I'm sure that there was there's a reason why, but if they signed off on it, then, that's us protecting or understanding the process, so.
That was a principle that we had included in the ordinance in Worth County as well, is there's been a lot of feedback, particularly from Invenergy, saying if the ordinance were to be in place at Worth County, it would preclude wind development in the county. Frankly, I think that's a scare tactic statement. If you take at face value the standards that are articulated in the ordinance, I would admit that, yes, there are a lot of locations in the county that would not allow a turbine just because of the distance setbacks on property lines, for example. But with regard to sound, shadow, and the safety setback, we included provisions for waivers. One of our principles was trying to make certain that these adjacent landowners, what we call non-turbine hosting landowners, have a voice in the process. In Worth County, with this wind project that Invenergy wants to do, there are 50 turbine locations. There are a grand total of 4 landowners that signed off on turbines that are within 2,000 feet of a turbine. There are 7 that are within a mile out of the 50 turbines. So all of the rest of these landowners that are wanting turbines on their property don't live anywhere near the turbines. Hundreds of other citizens do, and we wanted to make certain that they had a voice. So part of the rationale with the setbacks was not to negatively impact those residents unless they have a voice. And their voice is through the waiver process, where Invenergy and these other landowners have to engage with those non-turbine hosting landowners and say, can we move this closer? Is it okay for you to accept some shadow? Is it okay for you to accept some sound? And if they say it's okay, fine. If they get compensated, that's up to them.
Well, we were kind of on a time
Yes.
limit here, so I appreciate all the information, and
Thank
whether,
you for accepting our invitation.
Sure.
Yeah.
Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
it's good to know what the background is.
Either method works, it's just a matter of
Yeah.
which way you're comfortable.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Okay, it's 10 o'clock or thereafter, John Torbert, IDDA, to discuss annual updates.
Over here, if it's
That's
okay.
fine, that's fine.
How y'all doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm good.
Has it already been a year?
Well, I don't know if it's been a full year, but
Seems like you weren't here that long ago.
I catch you once each year, but that might be 4 months apart, depending on how I do my schedule. Thank you all for the opportunity to be here and have a little time. I appreciate that. A couple of things to talk about. First of all, as you probably know, last year we did not have a full-fledged annual meeting because of COVID. We elected, our bylaws require us to have a meeting. So we were in a position where we couldn't cancel the meeting altogether. So what we elected to do last year was just hold a business meeting so we could elect, our board members and approve our legislative policy. And we had 15 people at that, and it worked out fine. It lasted about 45 minutes. This year, we're back to a full-fledged annual meeting. That'll be December 3rd in Fort Dodge. And I will have a newsletter coming out later this month, which will have an agenda and a registration form. One thing that we're very pleased about is I just got email confirmation on Friday. The Secretary of Agriculture, Mike Naig, will be one of our speakers at our conference, so we're very pleased about that. So I hope you all are able to attend that. We are happy to be back to an in-person, full-fledged format as opposed to last year. Second thing I'll talk about briefly is what we have going on at the federal level. And, those of you who've been on the board for a while know that we have had this ongoing issue with waters of the United States. This traces back, have to go back to the Obama administration. And what regulation used to say was that EPA had the ability to regulate navigable waters. And they really didn't define navigable, but it was pretty clear that that excluded a lot of things. The Obama administration came in and took the word navigable out. So it said EPA has the ability to regulate waters in the U.S. The day that happened, they were sued, and a federal district court judge, I believe in Cincinnati, put a stay on the implementation of those rules. But since he was a district judge, his stay did not apply nationally. So there were some states that had the new rule and other states that didn't have the new rule. Iowa happened to be one of the states that didn't have the new rule. So that stay was in place. I don't believe has gotten resolved yet. Then the Trump administration comes along and says, we're going to go back to the old rule. So they go through the rulemaking process and basically put the word navigable back in with some other changes, which is what the rules say now. Well, now we're in a different administration. And the Biden administration has come in and said that we're going to take another look at waters of the United States. They really haven't been very specific yet in terms of what they have in mind, but we're going to watch that very closely. We certainly don't want to get into the situation where EPA is regulating drainage districts. That would be a nightmare. An example, I'm going to talk a little bit later about a federal grant that IDDA is involved in. This grant, we weren't the applicant, we're just a sub-grantee, but the applicant received notification in the summer of last year that they had been awarded the grant by EPA. We are now in October of the following year, so we're about 16 months after that. And the agreements that finalized that grant were just put in place last week. So it took a year and a half, in this case for NRCS, to finalize paperwork on a grant that they'd already awarded. And we certainly don't want to have to expose drainage projects to that kind of bureaucracy when you're all waiting around for somebody in Kansas City or somebody in Washington DC to sign off on a drainage project. So we're going to watch that very closely. Next thing I'll talk about is some legislation that we had this year that we're very pleased about. We think the legislation is going to have the impact of saving your landowners that are in drainage districts some money, and that's certainly one of the things that we look to do in the capital. Go back and give you a little history. We had a bill in the legislature last year. We had the bill passed, the House. We had it out of Senate committee. We had it on the Senate calendar. First week of March, it was ready to go. Leadership said, no problem. It's going to be a 5-minute bill. Get it to the governor's desk, and away we go. And then COVID hit. And the legislature went home. And the legislature did not come back into session until mid-June. When they came back, they didn't have a budget for the next fiscal year yet, which was starting in 2 weeks. So clearly their priority at that point was putting the budget together. And a lot of the policy bills, of which IDDA's was one, simply just did not get taken up. So we came back into the process this year and started over, new legislature, so we have to start over. The bill didn't hold over. So we did start over, and what the legislation does is 3 things. The first of those items actually was a legislative proposal that came out of our drainage clerks group that talks about what you have to do when you have a classification or reclassification. And what the law previously said is that when you do that, you have to publish the assessment schedule, the full schedule. And in some cases, the schedule is many, many pages long, especially for a big drainage project. And publishing that, we had some counties tell us that they were spending $8,000, $10,000, $11,000 for publication costs for this, publishing the schedule for information that the landowners already had. And the contention was that, and of course those costs get passed back to the landowners. So you're making landowners pay for these publication costs to receive information they already have. So the first thing the bill did is do away with that requirement. So you don't have to publish the full schedule now. Still have all the mailing requirements, the notification requirements. The only difference is the publication requirement. So as long as that information was readily available, you're going to be fine. So that's the first thing. The second thing relates to when you have to get an engineer's report on a repair. And what the law previously said is if a repair exceeded $50,000, you have to have an engineer's report. And I had a lot of county supervisors tell me, in this day and age, $50,000 you get there in a blink of an eye. It doesn't take much. I had some county supervisors express concerns to me. Said, when we're doing what essentially is a routine repair, and we have to get an engineer's report for that routine repair, here we are in a situation where the cost of that repair just went up. In some cases, it doubled. Just for the engineer's report. So we had some legislators and we agreed that $50,000 threshold needed to change. So the question then becomes, what do you change it to? And we had some legislators that wanted to go as high as $300,000 and $400,000. And we said, that's probably a little high to be spending $250 million on a drainage project without an engineer looking at it. So there's this thing in Iowa law called the competitive bid threshold, and that's been around for a long time. And that is a number that is set by a committee, so it can change as inflation changes. And it's used by a lot of state agencies. And the competitive bid threshold is currently $139,000. So since that number had history and precedent behind it, we decided to go with the competitive bid threshold. So the number that was chosen was $139,000, and that was in the final bill. So that's the second change. So, you know, if you have a repair under $139,000 now, you don't have to have an engineer's report. Certainly you can get an engineer's report anytime. You know, if you think the repair is going to be a little complex or has some unusual things going on and you want an engineer to look at it, you certainly can, but the requirement is no longer there unless you're above $139,000. So that was the second thing. And the third thing was an issue that came to us from state senator who was going to manage the bill on the Senate side. And her contention, or her concern was, she said, you know, in my district, I have a lot of snowbirds that, you know, head out of town whenever, December 1st, and they go south to Texas or Florida, wherever they go, and they may not come back till April. And a lot of them don't get their mail. And, you know, if they're receiving a drainage notice, they may not be aware of it. So why don't we put a thing in state law that talks about informal notice? Not formal, but informal. And basically what that means is the landowner comes to the auditor or the drainage clerk and said, you know, if you send something out, can you also email it to me? You can do that. It's not official notice, but it simply, you know, it gives the landowner another way of staying abreast what might be happening in their district. So those are the three changes that were made. We got the bill passed the House 97-0. We got the bill passed the Senate with 2 no votes. One of those votes was my state senator, and I'm going to have a conversation with her the next time I see her. I don't know why. And we got it to the governor's desk, and the governor signed it. So the bill did take effect July 1st. So those changes are in effect. I would say for next year, I'm going to be sending an email out probably in the next week or so here to all our member counties and say if you have any legislation you'd like to see considered that are part of our legislative agenda, to get them to me so we can put them in the package and have them voted on at our annual meeting. So we'll wait and see what our package looks like for the upcoming legislative year. Last thing I'll talk about is this federal grant that I mentioned that IDDA is part of. We were approached by the Iowa Ag Water Alliance, which is an offshoot group of the Iowa Soybean Association. And they were applying for a federal grant to NRCS for basically promoting conservation drainage. And they wanted IDDA to be part of the grant. We agreed to be part of the grant. And what they are saying basically is that, you know, currently in drainage law, the purpose of drainage is to move excess water off the land. Very simple. But we all know with climate extremes that we've experienced lately that, you know, we have times we're too wet and times we're too dry. So what if there's a way, instead of draining all the water off the land immediately, maybe we should save some of that water and hold some of that water back because we might need it when we're dry. And you can do that in several ways. You can change it, you can hold it in the soil profile. You can hold it in holding basins or wetlands or any number of things. I know there are, AgriGrain is a big company here in Iowa that's very well known that builds control structures that, you know, are basically a shuttlecock in the drain tile where you can regulate the flow coming out of the drain tile, and you can either open it all the way up or hold some of the water back. So what conservation drainage says is that, you know, let's not look at drainage as just simply draining the water. Let's look at drainage as water management. And let's look at it from a bigger picture, and that's what the grant is about. And where that could come in at your level, and what, you know, we're trying to have you all look at is, for example, if you have a drainage improvement, a major drainage improvement, Right now, what happens with an improvement for the most part is you put in bigger versions of what was there before. You're putting in bigger mains, so the water drains more quickly. Mains are outdated, they've been there 80 years, whatever, we need bigger mains. Well, conservation drainage says, as long as we're redoing that, maybe there's a way that we can incorporate some conservation structures into that while that improvement is being done to make drainage a more environmentally friendly process. So maybe we can incorporate some wetlands, maybe we can incorporate some saturated buffers, or maybe we can incorporate a bioreactor in that improvement. And there's already a project up in Pocahontas County where they're incorporating a wetland into a drainage improvement. And under the terms of this grant, and we haven't signed the subcontracts yet, but under the terms of the grant, our hope is that if that happens, the cost of those conservation practices can be paid for out of the grant. So if you want to build a wetland or want to build a bioreactor and incorporate that in, the cost of doing that would be paid for through grant money. That hasn't been finalized yet, but that's our hope and how this process works. So, at your level, that takes two things have to happen. First of all, you all as trustees have to be aware and looking at an improvement that's a possibility. You've got to tell the engineer who's designing that improvement, look at it from the point of view of can we incorporate some conservation structures into that? And secondly, of course, the engineers have to be able and willing and knowledgeable enough to do that, and we believe that they are. We have got an engineering firm here in Iowa, as a matter of fact, that's part of the grant, so they're very aware of how that takes place and what has to
Which engineering?
ISG. So
We had an improvement this last year that we looked at. I asked if we could incorporate anything like that, and he said, well, it's so flat.
yeah,
And
sure.
when you don't have the fall, it's hard
Yes.
to do.
Yes.
Now, part of that in the upper end, in the last mile of it or so, because mitigation costs were so high,
Sure.
the landowner has no intention of wanting better drainage.
Mhm.
So he's worked it out with the NRCS to retain all his water, and then he didn't have to mitigate it.
Yeah.
And if there was any way we could incorporate it into that, if there's any way to, utilize his land as a holding,
Sure.
it'd be great.
Yeah. Good.
But it's a tough year to know if it actually worked
Sure.
for the improvement, because everything was dry this year.
So that's all I've got, people.
I don't think we would have wanted to wait a year and a half to start that project because of a federal grant, though.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's anything.
So that 50,000 to 139,000, that just was in effect this last June,
July 1st
July
of
1st?
this year.
I knew that it happened, but I wasn't sure when.
Yeah.
And then it aligned both the competitive bid and the engineer requirement.
Mhm.
So as the competitive bid number goes up, the engineer number goes with it. automatically.
Well, not necessarily. The competitive bid threshold is set by a committee, so that's a separate process.
Okay, so it'd have to be legislation to change
Yes.
the engineer.
Yes.
Okay, all right. But for now,
Yes.
Could you make it in the legislation to follow that cost, so you wouldn't have to go back and forth?
Excuse me?
Could you make it part of legislation that competitive bid threshold is, that the drainage law would follow whatever it is, no matter
We
when
could
they
certainly
set
look
it?
at that.
for engineering.
And then you wouldn't have to go back
Yeah. we could
time and
certainly
time
look at
again.
that. Yeah, sure.
All right, well, thanks, John.
Thank you all, appreciate it.
Hope to see you in a couple
Yeah.
months.
Yeah.
Are we still on for December then?
Yes,
Awesome.
you needed to be here on time to hear that.
December 3rd.
I think I have it in my planner already, so.
All right, we'll see y'all.
All right,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Yeah.
Have a good rest of your day.
Yep.
Go to number 6, Auditor's Office, will discuss drainage matters.
I just got a text message back from Ron after I told him that I checked on the petition and that you were gonna get a hold of the contractor.
Okay.
And he says, thank you.
Okay.
All right. That's all I know. All right,
Did we ever approve the semi-monthly county claims?
no, that's still on the list.
Oh, okay. I thought you said we were,
No.
You thought he was getting ready to.
yeah.
All right. I think that's all that's left on our list was to consider for approval semi-monthly county claims.
I'll make a motion to approve the semi-monthly county claims.
I'll second that.
A motion from Jens Volk, a second from Smith to approve the semi-monthly county claims. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion carries. We stand adjourned.
Sally's open today?
Yeah.
She is.
I owe you coffee.
Was.
I owe you coffee and pie.
What? You only had time for pie.
She hasn't texted me the
Where's the other two?
closing. The last time she did that.
Okay,
No.
William's probably still asleep. William doesn't have class until 1 on Tuesday. Not very good about getting out of bed.
Well, you going for pie then?
Yeah. I think so, just
That
because
is
we,
flashing.
yes, it
Yes,
is.
it is.
Just because we moved through that pretty well.
You wanna knock on Brody's door?
So it's just you and me then, huh? Yeah.
I can't get the video to stop. Oh, sorry.
It's out of control. It's a runaway train.
Yeah, that was a bad noise. My cup would make that noise.
Try.
It's just the one part of the table.
My goodness.
Yeah, that's-
Shaky with it.
I'm just trying to annoy you two, being it's still on.
That'll get people to drop off.
Yeah, yeah.
Have a great day.
Thank you, you too.
I think so. My steel trap.
Can I use your headphones? Or I'm gonna go down and sit with Julie because it's too loud.
Yeah, do you have something to plug them into?
I don't know.
Here.